Alright, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to another video here on the channel, and today we're going to be talking about a proposed law that might be coming into the United States government within the next month or so that would federally legalize marijuana in the United States. Legalization of marijuana has been a hot button issue for probably decades at this point. There's been people pretty much always who have said that weed should be legal both recreationally and medically. And it's been something that people have debated for so long at this point, but we've never actually seen it become federally legalized at this point. We have seen a bunch of states legalize it in certain ways. There's been a bunch of states that are just completely okay with it. For instance, a bunch of states, they allow recreational use of it, meaning you can basically smoke it whenever you want, do whatever you want with it. As long as you know you're not harming other people or like driving or anything like that, you're usually pretty good and the law will protect your use of it. There's also a bunch of states that have legalized it for medical use, so people who have, like traumatic disorder, like, PTSD, they oftentimes are prescribed marijuana, like veterans are prescribed marijuana for PTSD a lot, people with, like, anxiety. It helps with a lot of people deal with pain and side effects of even worse diseases like cancer and other things, and there's just been a lot of generally accepted medical uses for marijuana, especially in, like, the last decade or so. But this potential bill would actually decriminalize weed altogether and would even establish a federal tax on all weed sales to generate tax revenue for the government off of the sales, and it would also regulate like interstate sales and things like that for weed. It actually is a pretty important piece of legislation because if this does end up passing, this will probably end up in the history books as, kind of like the second prohibition in the United States. Legislation that would decriminalize marijuana and establish a tax on cannabis sales was being developed by Republican Representative Nancy Mace with the goal of introducing it in the U.S. House of Representatives later this month, according to media reports. Marijuana Moment reported that the bill attempts to mark a compromise measure that would not be as far-reaching as more comprehensive bills others in Congress have been seeking. Aides to Mace were not immediately available for comment, and Reuters has not confirmed either the contents of a potential bill she might be working on or whether she is close to introducing any such bill. 18 U.S. states, most recently Connecticut in June, as well as the District of Columbia, have legalized the recreational use of marijuana. Marijuana, which remains prohibited by federal law, has been approved for medical use in 36 states and the District of Columbia. On Friday, Marijuana Moment reported that a draft of the States Reform Act legislation was being circulated, with a final version being readied within weeks. Okay, so first let's go ahead and really start to dissect this issue. So it's once again been like a hot button topic and everything going on, and people have argued for the legalization of marijuana probably longer than I've been alive at this point. But we have gotten to a point in society where the vast majority of people believe in the recreational use of marijuana. In fact, 60% of Americans support the use of recreational marijuana, and about another third or so of the population also supports medicinal use of marijuana, meaning that in total about 90% of Americans actually end up supporting the legalization of marijuana in some capacity, whether it be fully recreational and medical or medicinal only, it doesn't matter. The majority of Americans are starting to see that pot is not as harmful as people have made it out to be. And even though a bunch of states have made it legal in some capacity, that doesn't mean that it's federally legal. Here in the United States, you have state laws and you have federal laws. The federal laws, according to the Constitution, always supersede the states, but at this point, man, the federal government has just been kind of lagging behind what people actually want. I mean, so many states have been making moves to open up marijuana sales in their states to some degree because, in all reality, the pros vastly outweigh the cons. I mean, there's already been so many, medically accepted uses of marijuana that the medical argument's pretty much over with. It is beneficial to some capacity with, certain things. The real benefit that I feel like really has been overlooked, I guess, by the federal government is just how much money and taxes that this industry can actually create, the benefits financially that it can create. For instance, a study that came out in 2018 said that a legalized marijuana industry here in the United States could actually generate $132 billion in federal tax. And that's just within a decade. And it would also apparently create more than 1 million new jobs. So, in a time where I guess they talk about nobody wants to work, we have this labor shortage. They're always constantly fighting about, what are we going to spend our money on now? What are we going to spend the tax dollars on now? Why don't we just generate hundreds of billions of dollars in extra revenue by legalizing this industry and also, create jobs? And then that way too, we can stop incarcerating people for using marijuana. And you gotta realize the United States is the most incarcerated place on earth. The American prison population is absurd, and a lot of it has to do with, the war on drugs and how hard that society's been fighting marijuana and all this stuff. And honestly, it's just not a war that's going to be won. The majority of people actually support the use of marijuana. A lot of people use it, and all we're really doing is missing out on a bunch of benefits, right? You hear about all the cons of marijuana, the cons, what'll happen, right? Well, you gotta think, we're already seeing what'll happen. There's people, a very good portion of people also, who use marijuana. I mean, I'm included in that. I smoke weed too. A lot of people do, okay? And you already have all these cons in society, right? You want to name all these cons of marijuana. These already exist, right? Why are we not at least outweighing them with the good by passing this bill? Mace is a first-term House member. According to Marijuana Moment, her bill would put the interstate regulation of marijuana under the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, which is an agency within the Treasury Department. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration also would have a limited role in regulating products, according to the report. Recreational cannabis use would be limited to those 21 and older, and much like federal controls on alcohol, there would be advertising restrictions on marijuana. There are few legislative weeks remaining in this session of the deeply divided Congress, and it was unclear how much lawmakers will be able to get done once the 2022 midterm election campaigns get started early next year. So the real issue that this bill that is supposedly to be proposed within the next month or so is actually going to, there's a lot of problems surrounding it, okay? First and foremost, even though this is being introduced by a Republican, Republicans traditionally oppose legalization of marijuana a lot more than Democrats do. I feel like, Democrats are mostly in favor of weed, and then, of course, you look at like the Republican senators and lawmakers, they're the ones that a lot of people think the issue is going to arise out of here. Now, it did take me by surprise that this was being proposed by a Republican because of that historical opposition to legalizing marijuana, but honestly, man, I don't care who proposes it at this point. I think that this is something that needs to happen, and, there are, of course, the issues, once again, to circle back around. For instance, who knows if this is ever going to be proposed? There's probably lots of legislation and whatnot that is written, intended to be, I guess, introduced in the House or whatnot, and then, of course, just never really sees the light of day, right? They never propose it or anything, or it never gets finished, or they abandon the project, whatever it may be, but I feel like that this one may actually pass if it does go through, because there are still a lot of restrictions. Like the article said, this is a compromise bill, because a lot of the, I guess, legalization arguments and movements that have actually happened before have either been too far on one side or too far on the other. For instance, there's a lot of people who want to open marijuana sales up and everything, but they don't want to regulate it enough, right? They want it to just be more of an open market. And they want lower taxes on it, and they want less restrictions and whatnot, right? They want those kinds of things. But then, of course, there's also the other side that wants to overly regulate it, right? They want to, I guess, open it up or make it legal and everything, but they don't want to do enough to actually make it a, legitimate industry. Perhaps they want to overtax it, or they want to over-enforce a bunch of insane regulations that would just make it impossible for these businesses to grow, or realistically for it to even be feasible to even get this through law. I think that this is one of the laws that actually has a shot, because it kind of, compromises both sides. For instance, it taxes it. It's not a completely terrible tax. I mean, it could have been 10%. States will probably add their own taxes onto it and whatnot too, but, they got the tax and everything going for it. They have the recreational use to be limited to 21 and older, which is, the same with tobacco and alcohol. Some places you only have to be 18 to smoke tobacco, I believe, unless it was federally changed, but I know that in a lot of places you have to be 21 anyway. And, it has that restriction, it has the advertising restrictions, so, you're not going to open up Nickelodeon for your kids, and, a fucking commercial pops out, "Hey kids, you ever been baked before? Well, get this 5-gram honey backwood combo platter down at fucking Smokey's house." Like, that's not going to happen or anything like that, at least according to what we're seeing here. So, there's a lot of problems, of course, and there's a lot of potential, I guess, for compromise here, but it really is going to depend on whether or not it really gets proposed. And then, of course, as the article mentioned, how it's going to be treated once everything is kind of like, I guess, up and going, in terms of like, once they get it proposed, are they actually ever going to vote on it? Because there's not a lot of time left before, they're going to be campaigning again. Next year is an election year. A lot of them are going to be trying to pull for their respective sides to win. There's going to be a lot of campaigning. People's seats are up on the line here. Like, it's going to be important and everything, so they will be campaigning. But the truth is, man, even if this doesn't even get proposed or realistically, I guess, passed or anything like that, I think it's really only a matter of time before it does, right? Like I said, you've seen all these states in recent years that are kind of making the change, right? They're like, you know, at least medical or sometimes full out recreational, but a bunch of states are already moving to make their own laws around it, and they're already regulating it and everything. Like Colorado is literally doing crazy things. They're making a bunch of crazy amounts of tax revenue with it. It's funding schools and all kinds of things. So the effects are already there. Like, we're already starting to see like how this is being implemented. This would just federally, you know, make it legal. It would end the prohibition on marijuana. It would create a new industry. It would provide so much more tax revenue. We'd be locking a lot less people up. We wouldn't have to pay so much in prison costs and things like that. Like, the benefits, I feel like, really do outweigh the cons, even if I am a little bit biased because I smoke. In all reality, I feel like things that the majority of people support, especially here in the United States, those are the things that we really should be prioritizing in terms of law, and I think that this is, it has its benefits all around. Sure, is it the most important pressing thing ever? Probably not. But I think that this is honestly better than them fucking meeting and determining whether or not they're going to give a bunch of money in financial aid to somebody who doesn't deserve it in the world, right? Some country that doesn't fucking need it. Giving taxpayer dollars away or pissing it away on something like they do. I think it would just be best if we got this issue out of the way and just started making tax money and stuff off of it, man. So with that being said, thank you guys for watching. If you did enjoy, make sure to leave a like. Subscribe if you're brand new around here on the channel. Follow me over on Twitter and Twitch at @SubToOptimus. Make sure to check out Shop Opti down below. And until my next video, guys, this is Optimus, well, reporting on the potential legalization of weed and signing out.